Thank you. Let's see if you can spot me 16 years ago. So today I'm gonna have a chat with you about dance and neuroscience. I'm gonna try to ask you a couple of questions. I'm gonna, if you could raise your hands and try to make this a bit more interactive, okay? So, how many here likes dance, any kind of dance, theater, on your phone, TikToks? Fantastic. Yes, I definitely like dance too. How many of you can dance? Professional dancers, whatever, dancing in your room, in the car? Okay, that's great, okay. This is a bit of a spoiler, but how many of you use dance in your research? How many scientists do we have here? How many people think we can use dance to do neuroscience? That's fantastic. Again, the title was a spoiler, obviously, about the thing. Let's check. Okay, so here just an idea of how different researchers use dance in their, let's say, daily activities. So for instance, when we have our participant coming to the lab, typically we ask them to stay super still because we're trying to get some kind of brain activity. So typically we don't ask them to dance inside the lab, but we are trying to use the knowledge that their body and their brain basically has acquired through the years. So we ask them to, I don't know, to rate videos of images of dance, for instance. We try to acquire some kind of brain activity with different techniques, depending on our research question. If we're lucky enough, we also have some kind of physiological reactions of how the body is reacting in terms of breathing activity, cardiac activity, and also we can also compute some kind of features. So for instance, if we have movement and we are interested to understand how the brain perceives time dynamics, we can compute some kind of velocity profile, acceleration profile, and try to use this objective measure inside our regressor. So the idea is, let's acquire this for stream of data and try to merge them with some kind of statistical modeling. This is a plot similar to what Professor Chatterjee showed yesterday. Over the past 20 years, the numbers of studies using dance has increased notably, which is absolutely fantastic. This review is stopped this analysis until 2022. During the past 3 years, there's been an increasing number of publications with different dance styles. Why is that very important? Because so far, 90% of research on how we perceive dance is based on Western culture, so contemporary, modern dance, classical ballet. But we know, luckily enough, that in the world we have so many different, dance styles, techniques, and culture. And we know that to reach specific body skills, also our brain has to adapt. So different types of techniques, dance style, might have help us to develop different neurocognitive skills, for instance, okay? And so it's really good that finally we are also starting to introduce cross-culturality and comparing, how different people from different culture respond to different kind of dance. I'm gonna try to answer this very quickly. Why dance? So why not cricket? Why not martial arts? So what's the cool thing about dance that we can study? Well, from my perspective, and I think that every researcher has different interests about dance, is that it's an activity that have different layers. So I can focus on the movement of the body itself. I can be interested in kinematics, how the brain perceives faster movements, slower movements, smooth movements. I can be interested in dynamics between different bodies. I can be interested in a single step, a sequence of steps, like entire choreography. I can analyze a single body, two dancers, a trio, an ensemble of people moving together. And then I can also try to understand how works the communication of emotions. So a dancer, a choreographer has an intention, this is communicated through movement, how am I receiving it? And so what about the dramaturgy? What about the overall meaning that I wanna transmit with the performance? Okay, this is important because again, to study a complex phenomenon like dance in the lab, we have to divide it in so many different factors. So for instance, the most typical thing is to remove the typical clothes, the music, all the environment, putting a single body, moving on a gray background. Sometimes we also blur the face to have no distraction for the face. So what are we studying? Is dance? Because if I go see a performance, like right now I start dancing and I have an audience that is live, what you're perceiving here right now compared to what you see my recording on a video screen, in a computer screen, in the lab, is a completely different experience. Okay. Very briefly, we can say that we can use dance in two ways. So today I'm going to be focusing on perception of dance. So I'm not going to touch any of the what's happening in the brain while we are dancing. Okay. Typically we can use dance as a model behavior. So we can try to understand, how much the brain of a dancer changed after 10 years of practice compared to someone that never danced in their life, or how the brain of a dancer represents or imagines movements. Okay. But we can also use dance as a subject. So neurostatic is about what kind of features of the stimulus and what kind of features of myself allow me to say, this movement is fantastic. I want to rewatch this choreography again. Or this was very unsettling. I don't like this, make me feel anxious. So we can have this kind of dichotomy. This is just a review that Professor Cross published a few years ago, last year. This is all the kind of cognitive processes associated with dance that I've been studying so far. Just what I wanted to show you is that the majority of studies are being on basic research, but there's also, we can see in red and in yellow, there's also a lot of more clinical application for this. Okay, so they apply to well-being, for instance, and also development of new methods, because the more we try to be ecological valid, so the more we try to study something that is actual dance and not just a fraction of dance, the more we have developed tools to study this, because the phenomenon gets complicated. I think I'm halfway through, no? I don't know. So my idea today is not to focus on a specific study that has been done so far, but just give you like a hint on these 5 different questions very, very quickly, pointing out results in the literature and something that I've been working on. And then if you have any interest of any of this, we can, doing the question, we can go more in depth, okay? So let's try to see what dance has helped us reveal about the brain, what do we know about why we find some movement more likable or enjoyable or interesting to watch. Let's try to understand if our internal body signals, if my heart rate, my heartbeat influence the way I'm perceiving someone else moving in front of me. And if dance can be helpful also to study social interaction, so to open a window on social cognition, and then just literally 30 seconds of what kind of new technology can help us in pushing research outside the lab. Okay. So this is very, very quick. This is the very historical study. So Calvo Merino showed in the scanner 2 professional dancers in control, different kind of movements, and what they found is that when the dancers were observing movement they were used to train to do, there was activation in this frontoparietal system, and this was, let's say, stronger, not all, let's say, for the specific repertoire movement, meaning that if I show you ballet and capoeira, try to match the kinematic of movements, the strongest activation was when the dancer were watching dance and the capoeira dancer watching capoeira. So it's not a matter of how similar is the movement, but how my body, my motor program can actually reproduce this. Something similar apply in a study of cross. If I'm scanning a group of dancers before and after engaging them in 5 weeks training, and then I show them sequences that have been training against sequences that they didn't know, again, we have this activation that pops out. This is another technique. This is EG. So first it was fMRI, this is EG. This is a study I did when I was doing my PhD. And we saw that, for instance, with professional ballet dancers, if you show them short movement and ask them, look at this movement, and then in a second moment you have to try to imagine it, what we found is that during this phase, the professional dancers show activation on their occipital, let's say, activity over bilateral occipital regions, where we have regions specialized for movement, body and faces, while the non-dancers were mostly activating the right parts. Okay. We can skip this. We can skip it. It's just another example. So typically we talk about action observation network, where we talk about, perception of movement. So we have this frontoparietal system that somehow simulate the movement that we observe. The more we know them, the more we have activation. And we also have the engagement of this occipital region that are again associated or linked to specific perception of human bodies, human faces, and again, movements. This is a representation of this. So we have visual areas in yellowish, we have the sensory motor areas in red, and then we have this frontal and reward area system with also the insula cortex that Professor Chatterjee yesterday pointed out in a couple of studies. This is basically the network that is engaged and modulated while we are actually doing some kind of aesthetic evaluation of movement, okay? And this is resonated also with the proposal of Professor Chatterjee about the aesthetic experience being grounded in three main, let's say, topic or networks or systems: the sensory motor one, the emotion evaluation one, and the system of knowledge and meaning. As we said before, quickly, we know now that we have different objective features that are modulating this system, this network, and also individual features. The individual features, the most studies again, is expertise. Okay, just an example, also to show us a bit of dance. So this is an example of study which we focus a bit on temporal dynamics. We wanted to see whether a movement that was executed performed like a choreographer, we on first sight created it. So with acceleration, deceleration, and pauses was perceived differently by the brain compared to one in which we remove all the dynamics, so it was like a Tai Chi fluent movement. To do this, we get, as I was saying before, we can compute some kind of kinematic profile, so getting acceleration, a velocity, the trajectory. We can compute some fancy measurement like the entropy smoothness that tell us how the movement is smooth, so fluent, and how with entropy, how it's predictable. And what we found basically is that when we ask non-professional dancers to observe these different categories of movements, the varied movement, so the one that is less smooth, more predictable, because it looks like some kind of, how to say, exaggerated version of a daily movement, is perceived as more enjoyable, but difficult to reproduce. And when the same study is done inside the scanner, we have again the activation of our action observation network, and then we also have the insular cortex. The insular cortex is very important because again, it's mapping our internal body signals and also inform our evaluation of emotion or ability based on this visual sensation. Okay. How much time do I have? Okay, should be fine. Okay, so other two brief things. The other question was that was actually originated from this study was, so if visual information is so important, if I'm able to focus on my heart rate, I'm going to use my heart rate as an input for what's happening on the screen. Am I able to modulate how people perceive dance? Okay, and we did a couple of study on this. I'm going to try to be super quick. This is a bit technical, but I think it's nice. So this is our heartbeat, and we know that in the first part of the heartbeat, from the big peak to the green part, what is called ventricular systole, and we know that we have the baroreceptor, that are sensors that we have on the aortic arch, that are sending signal to the brain. These baroreceptors are not firing specifically during the second part, the diastole, and we know in literature that if we flash a negative, fearful face in the first part of the cycle, this phase is perceived as more intense, and we are more able to detect this doing distractors. Okay, so we ask ourselves, but does this apply also to bodies? And instead of having fearful body posture, if you have dense posture that range between positive, negative, different balance, what's going on? What's happening? These are a lot of plots. So the take-home message is actually we found that if we how much our participants were rating, how emotionally intense was perceiving this body posture was positively associated with how much they were feeling their body reacting to this body posture. But this positive link was disrupted when we represented inverted body posture during systole. So when the brain is receiving information from our internal body map, and we show a body posture that is upside down, so it's somehow incongruent, let's say we are less able to use this bodily sensation to infer the emotion that we perceive in others. Make sense? Okay. I think I'm gonna jump, yes. This is something that is still kind of new in literature. There's a lot of studies about, So we also have another one in which show that if we show people on the screen to people walking, for instance, and we ask them to choose which one they like watching the most, and one is always synchronized with their heart rate. So if my heart goes like this, the walk is basically go like this, and the other one is slightly faster or slower, we balance all the conditions. We found that overall there's a preference for the fast one, but also a preference for the synchronized. And this preference is there only when the body is upright. When we put the body upside down, this preference is not there anymore. Why? We can discuss this in the questions, because we open another topic that is body inversion effect. I think the very last thing I want to point it out is that not only the majority of studies are based on Western culture, so ballet, contemporary dance, but also are based on single body perception. While we experience dance with a partner in the theater, yes, we have, fantastic, we have single bodies, but majority of the time we have people interacting with other people, ensemble. choreographer use different configuration on the space just to modulate our engagement. So we know that in the brain, the brain is specific sensitive to informations. When I'm moving in synchrony with someone, and when I'm, let's say, face-to-face to someone compared to back-to-back. There are different studies that are showing that the brain tends to perceive this two body in synchrony or two body facing each other more like a unit compared to when the two bodies are moving outside synchrony or they are back-to-back. But again, from our experience on the stage, choreographer just don't ask people, dancer, to move back to back and face to face. We use different level of the space. We come closer, we use the distance, we overlap, we entangle the bodies. So we decided, why not try to get from contemporary dance all these elements that choreographer use and try to systematize them, to measure them, and see how the brain is reacting to these features. Okay. So what we did is we put sensors, kinematic sensor on a couple of dancers. We came up with this geometric task they call the body-body interaction task, and we asked them, we gave them different rules, but the idea is let's create some kind of posture that we call entangled. So if I'm thinking about my two hands, this position is entangled, okay? Our dancers are never touching each other, but this is the idea. And then since we have the motion kinematic, we can create this entangled version. So if I'm just turning my hand slightly around like this, the same position, same posture, but one is less functionally, intersecting with the other one. And what we found here is, there's a lot of things happening in the slide, but is that actually the same body posture that were entangled were perceived as more likable to watch, interesting to watch, and more meaningful. And the fact that we're more meaningful being the same posture itself, I think it's really interesting. And then a lot of computational analysis, we are also able to understand, okay, let's say, what combination of these factors that we measure, so the height in the space, the distance, the entanglement, the overlapping, are contributing to how much we like watching this posture, how much we found them emotional. Okay, and so far. The very last thing is just so this study, I think it was interesting. We also have a couple of EEG studies, so we also have brain activity coming from this. And we found a very nice effect also that the brain is in an early stage of processing, is able to actually perceive this manipulation of entanglements. This was a way to try to increase again our, how much our stimuli resemble real life stimuli. So our, help me? Ecological validity. Okay. Other methods that we can use to do this is using virtual reality. A lot of choreographers are experimenting now, having performances, having dancers within the virtual space in different cities, and having contact happening and people perceiving this. So virtual reality, augmented reality could be fantastic tools to actually understand, for instance. I'm able to learn a sequence of movement better if I have a human person, but if I have an avatar or the same person in the virtual space, is the same thing or not? Also, another thing is the application of AI. Dr. Darda here that created already a couple of papers about it, about how we're able to distinguish between choreographies that are generated by a computer versus a human. What is the bias there? It's depending on our knowledge of belief that they are created by a computer, or there's, let's say, a physical difference between them. And the last tools that are very useful, it's something called hyperscanning. I mean, now you are listening to me, and we have, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 people, okay? The experience of you listening to me right now is completely different than you listening to me in front of your computer screen or alone. So there are different studies in this process called Neuroscience, in which they were trying to understand why perceiving something together matters. And neuroscanning means that I can record brain activity from multiple people in the same time and understand how, let's say, fluctuation in the choreography, so how the choreographer created a piece to engage you, scare you, to make you laugh, actually modulate similar way in real time brain activity. This is the very last slide that I have. Obviously, if you want to try to increase this validity, so we are going to try to approach, okay, now what I'm studying in the lab is closer enough to dance. Okay, we have to face the fact that this field of study is really young. Okay, 20 years ago basically originated. And we have a lot of, let's say, lack of standardized methods and principles. So different people are studying different things, using different methods, doing whatever they want. So they're using their personal expertise combined with science. This creates a great variety, but it's very complicated then to put together all the results in something that is coherent. So together with a group of colleagues and also Koinori is part of this, obviously, we are trying to create this 7 principle framework to guide future study in neuroscience using dance. Okay, so the idea here is trying to make sure that we all share the same information, they share parameters to make sure that we're able to put together different studies, especially when doing studies that are intercultural. So we, test multiple participants in different countries. But this is basically what's happened so far. So we said basically that in this overview, dance is actually a fantastic medium to study human brain. It's also a very fascinating, intriguing field of study as a subject itself. That we have this modulation of the action observation network and other networks based on different parameters of the movement that we are interested in. We are starting slowly to move towards interactions rather than single bodies. I try to understand that also our body signal, what's happening in our body matters, and the moment I have to watch and observe dance. And also the more we push research outside the lab, the more we need technology to support this, new statistical methods, and also guidelines. So this is everything I have for you today. These are all people that are collaborating with me with all the studies that I've talked to you so far. And since I started with questions, I'm going to leave you with another question. I borrowed this question from Professor Chatterjee, but it's not directly to me, it's directly to you. Since we have a lot of dancers here, what do you think is still missing? As a dancers, as people that work with dance, as a practitioner, as a therapist, in the theoretical settings, what do you think? What do you know about the brain of a dancer? What do you think is still missing in this overview of studies? That's it.